Hey, good morning to those of you out there on the West Coast. Good afternoon to those of you here on the East Coast with me. It's a beautiful day, so I'm excited to get started on today's training. Let me just turn these captions off. Um, I want to say thank you to those of you showing up early and on time. I really appreciate that. When you show up early and on time, you're putting the word out to LinkedIn. It's a simple thank you to us by just showing up early and on time, right? But it also pushed the word out to LinkedIn saying, hey, we've started, we're gone live, so come on and join us and be part of the network. Also, thank you for those of you engaging in chat. The chat is your community. It's a chance to network while I do training. I like to say thank you to those showing up early and on time by giving you a tip. And so my tip for you today, and usually I hold up the book and I don't have it with me. It's way over there. But my tip for you today is dig your well before you're thirsty. And there's a book I would show you. Maybe somebody will put it in the chat. It's by Harvey Mackay. And this book, Dig Your Well Before You're Thirsty, hopefully it makes sense just listening to that, right? Don't wait until you're thirsty before you start digging a well. You'll be long gone by the time you ever get to water. And networking is that same thing. You want to be building relationships with others in the industry or government personnel, government buyers. You want to build relationships with these people long before you need them, right? So networking is about getting out there and digging your well before you're thirsty, or building those relationships before you'll need to ask them for a favor or ask them for information. We're going to talk today about how do federal buyers search for a company like yours, but really how to be visible to those federal buyers. And that's part of the activity around digging your well before you're thirsty. So that's just a quick tip for those of you showing up early and on time. Happy Friday. I love seeing people come in here from Hawaii, from Portland. Hey, Emily. And from all around the country. This is what I love about us being virtual. Yes, we can do a physical in-person event, but that limits who can come. When it's virtual, anybody can attend. And so make sure you invite 2 friends the next time. All right, let me dive into the meat of today's training around how federal buyers find us. There are hundreds of thousands of federal buyers, not thousands, hundreds of thousands of federal buyers looking for small businesses just like yours at any given point in the year. And they absolutely want to find you. They want to hear how you can help them. They look to small businesses as companies that are as nimble as their needs are. Their requirements and their needs change throughout the year, and small businesses are like a speedboat on the water. We can turn on a dime, and they know we can help them. They want to hear from you, right, and hear how you can help them. But they need to be able to find you in order to do that, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Federal buyers, though, are not going to break their neck trying to find you. They need to fill the need that's going to address the mission, their agency mission, right? They need to address that quickly. They're not going to sit there and try to go way out of their way to find you. So you need to be visible where they're looking. And that's really what we want to talk about today is understanding how federal buyers find small business government contractors like you. That's what we're going to dive into today. And I'm going to break it up so that we really cover 4 sections of this topic. First thing is just reminding ourselves, what is market research? When I say how federal buyers search for you, that's market research. That's them looking for industry partners. The second thing we're going to talk about is who are the federal buyers that I keep saying, right? I say how federal buyers search for you. Well, who are the federal buyers and who does that market research? Third thing I want to talk about is where do they look for you? What's kind of the checklist, not the checklist, but the process they follow when they say, hey, I got to go off and do market research in industry. I got to go off and see if I can find small businesses to help us with our need. So where do they go looking for you? Where do federal buyers look for you? That's what we're going to talk about. And I'm going to wrap up today's training with a checklist of how you get on a short list, right? How do federal buyers determine whether they're going to put you on a short list? And a short list is just 10 companies. Imagine if there's 360,000, there is 360,000 small businesses selling to the federal market. A short list is 10 or 20 of them that the buyer will then reach out to somehow or another, engage you. So if that's what you're here for today, understanding how federal buyers search for you and seeing how that really is market research, put market research in the chat. Let me know that you're aligned to what I'm going to be teaching today. So market research into the chat. If you don't know who I am, my name is Neil McDonald. I am the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce. I'm co-founder of GovCon in a Box, and I want to welcome you to my federal sales training where I provide tips for success in the federal market. I spent 20 years in the federal market as a small business owner. And since 2018, I've been teaching people like you that government contracting is not a secret. It's just a process. When we follow a process A to Z, we're going to have repeatable, predictable results. And that's what I want for you. Make sure you subscribe to our Government Contracting Success newsletter. It's a newsletter packed with information, tips, and guidance on getting into agencies, selling to agencies, etc. So subscribe to the newsletter so you can see our next episode or article. And then the other thing I wanted to point out, if you see here, I don't have next week's training lined up, but I'm actually still trying to decide whether I do training next week because I'm going to be speaking in Atlanta. But I did want you to know that we have training replays. I've done well over 500 trainings just like this in the last 2 years alone. And you can get access to all those replays right here on LinkedIn. Just go to my profile and you'll see a featured article that just lists out all the past events. You can also go to my events tab. And so maybe somebody will put a link in there. I did want to welcome congratulate all of these 67 companies who are in the 100 Club. The 100 Club is something we're doing on our GovCon in a Box platform where we help you understand your federal visibility score. That score can be 0 to 100. And that's how visible are you with the federal buyers. And so if you go to govconinabox.com, you will be able to see your score. You'll be able to see the tips that I give you for what to fix on the federal buyers tools in order to increase your visibility. And then you can sit there and raise yourself up to 100 score. I was looking, I think it was Aspire number 66. They started at a 54 and over a few days, they really worked themselves up to 100 and joined the 100 Club. This is important because this is one of the fundamental ways that federal buyers find you. So go check out govconinabox.com. So what is market research in the federal market, right? This is fundamentally buyers are just looking for you. That's what market research is. And if you understand sales and sales marketing, however you want to put it together, there's two ways it can happen. One is outbound, the other is inbound. Outbound is you knocking on doors. So I used to sell vacuum cleaners. Go back to the very beginning of my career, selling vacuum cleaners door to door. I would knock on doors across the neighborhood. And you can imagine how brutal that is, first off. But second, you can only knock on so many doors in a given day. And when I was out in San Francisco, that's where I lived. And so you had hundreds of thousands of households I could be knocking on. But really, I can only knock on 50 or 100 a day before you just get totally tired. And that's like being super aggressive. Inbound is just answering the door when the buyer is knocking on your door. And so when I was working for a company called Electrolux, it was them coming and knocking on my door. Fast forward 20 plus years, and outbound is me reaching into federal agencies. I have knocked on federal agencies' doors by picking up the phone and calling them or sending RFIs, et cetera. So I can knock on their door. But inbound, and this is the most important thing, inbound is having those federal buyers find me, call me up and say, hey, Neil, tell us about your business. Can you deal with this requirement that we have? And so understand the difference between inbound and outbound. Outbound is just going to be a fraction, far less than 1% of the potential buyer pool. And we'll talk about that in a second. The second thing I wanted to just point out about what is market research. In market research, this is where the government, and I summarize this all down into, they're talking about the technical approach, or in this case, I wrote discussing the scope and the requirements. And so they could be talking about it at a very early stage, or they could be talking about it really close to when the RFP is going to drop, but they're thinking about the requirements. The other half of that equation is that they're exploring acquisition approaches. Which direction should we go? Should we go with this NAICS code? Should we go with this contract vehicle, this set aside? And so market research, that's what they're doing. They're looking for companies like yours that can come in and talk to them about the technical side of it or the acquisition approach side of it. Here's another way to look at what is market research in just this roadmap that I lay out. And I try to sit there and say, if you look at the far right-hand side, I like to say market research begins and or ends in the execution of a contract. So if a contract's 5 years long, there's market research that's going on. I can get in there, and that's a really informal period, but that's all during the sales cycle, right? But as you start shifting left and you've got the award, this is the formal process. There's no real market research happening there. The RFP phase is when they're sitting there doing the acquisition itself. They put out an RFP, they're trying to get your response. This is all the formal part of the buying acquisition lifecycle. But market research is the very first step of the formal side of the acquisition lifecycle. And in here, you can be familiar or understand that it's things like an RFI dropping out there. They're doing industry days or advanced planning briefs to industry talking about opportunities that are coming. It's FAR driven. So in the formal market research, there's guidelines to the contracting officers and the acquisition staff on how they do it, right? So they're documenting what they're doing and they're making sure they're making a fair effort to reach small businesses in particular. They might put out sources sought and RFIs. This is where they're determining set aside. If we don't respond to sources sought, then the government has no way to know that we would respond to an RFP. So instead of making it woman-owned set aside or small business set aside, they make it full and open. Now we're competing against billion-dollar firms. The way they're able to bring that down on so many more opportunities is when more of us small businesses respond. The number one market research tool is DSBS. I'll talk more about that. But during market research, when they're looking for small businesses in particular out there, less about the requirements and more about the acquisition approach, they'll look into the dynamic small business search tool. All right, so if you keep coming over to the left, though, this is a huge portion where I think a lot of us either aren't familiar with it or we just don't put the energy into it, and or we don't have the time, right? And that's totally fine. You sit there and say, at some point, I'm going to get to it. But I really want to point out that as you think about how buyers are finding you, they're finding you all along the journey, including when they're in this informal stage of exploring the requirements. The program office is trying to decide where they want to go in different directions. This is where our podcasts or our white papers, doing YouTube videos about AI and how it fits in, or the newest research in elevator security, things like that, right? This is where you're having meetings, not about a particular opportunity, but you're in there just talking about the future of whatever you sell and understanding their problems, talking to them about their goals and having a discussion with a potential buyer in there. And so this could also include the conferences you go to, social media activity. One last thing I'd like to say here, and I'll just move on, is a lot of times we kind of wait for an RFP to drop, right? And then we respond. Some of us get a little earlier and we wait for an RFI or sources sought to drop and then we respond. That's perfect. That's totally okay. If that's as far left as you go, then do it and do it well. But you can also go further to the left, right? So you can come to the left when they're thinking about putting together an RFI and a sources sought. They're in this area where inside their program office, they're talking about a need. They're talking about a challenge or a goal, right? But you can also go further to the left where you introduce the ideas. I had a customer a couple of months ago where we went in, one of their customers, and we started talking to them about how they could use AI to reduce the costs within their organization, while at the same time, we're having discussions with them about how tough it is that the budget constraints that they have within their particular agency is limiting their ability to do work, how their people are really stressed out because of all the work that are on their shoulders. It's kind of a hiring freeze going on. And so we were able to give them ideas that they can explore. It doesn't mean they're just going to give us a contract right there, but that whole idea is how they find you, right? They find you if you get yourself inserted into the discussion at any given point, right? And you want to be as early as possible, but it's okay if you're farther back. So let's talk about who does market research. So I have here who does research with KOs and COs. Really quickly, I just like saying this just for those of you who are new. CO and KO stands for contract officer, right? In the military, we say KO because CO stands for commanding officer. And so we needed something fancy. We went, well, let's just change the C to a K and be done with it. And so COKO is the contracting officer. I think we all probably have an idea that the contracting officers are doing market research, but who else does it, right? When you think about the contracting officer, the contract specialist, et cetera, these are called acquisition professionals. Within the federal government, these are people who are in a career field of acquisition. But there are so many other people who help out with an acquisition. So when you think about market research, it isn't just that pool of people. And by the way, they're in the DoD alone, there's 185,000 plus acquisition related personnel just in that contracting career field, if you will. But they come across all these different functional areas, as you probably see here, right? Planning a requirement, cost estimating, understanding what would this even cost us before we can get to budgeting. In the middle here, we have to have an idea of what the cost is. That's why sometimes you see the government putting out documents asking us, what do you guys think it'll cost? And I used to love that in my last company because I knew my work. And so we would be able to give them a really good understanding, and we would give them a range. Basically, if you want the basic, the mid-level, or the top level response. And then you got program management and execution. So you've got all the way to the other side. Remember, in my other diagram, I showed you execution of the contract. It hits in there. And so these are personnel who are outside the traditional acquisition workforce that are responsible for those. And here I'm just reading it, right? The critical elements of defense acquisition. This is DoD's document, which was, it's in this great big report. That's awesome. But the one I really want you to pay attention to, right, is developing the requirements. These people who are thinking about the idea, they're not the buyer. They're the end user. They're the people who will take it. The KO is the buyer, right? But you've got to shift to the left in the conversation, in the acquisition lifecycle, if you will, to get in. And by the way, I have all sorts of training about how do you get in the door. But today I'm talking about how do you get them to find you. But if you have an opportunity to try to get in the door, I have tens and tens of training about how to do emails, phone calls, get in and get a meeting, get a repeat meeting. So go watch the repeat trainings. Okay, so just keep in mind, when you think about who does market research, it's the program office, it's the acquisition personnel, and it's the small business professionals out there as well. And we'll talk more about this in a second, literally a second. So here it is. So where do federal buyers look for you? I put together this list a while ago, and this is based off just numerous conversations with contracting officers. And there can be some variations of how people change it. And if anybody ever wants to give me another one I'm missing, I'd love to have it. I always want to provide complete, accurate, and timely information. But this is how contracting officers or agencies, federal buyers, look for small businesses like yours. And think about this, right? They start off with, I've got this need. I'm talking to my program office friends, and we've got this need we need to figure out with industry. So the first thing we do is we look inside. We look to the incumbents we're happy with, and we say, hey, are any of these people good for us to talk to? Right? And we may or may not decide. Sometimes a contracting officer might say, you know what, I'd like to get new blood in here, right? And no reflection on the incumbents, but they might jump out to the outside, right? But in the beginning, we start by looking at the incumbents, the people who already have contracts with that agency. The second thing second place they look are contract vehicle holders for the contract vehicles we prefer. So if you think about the Navy, NAVC is a major contract vehicle that's used by many of the Navy. And so I might look in that contract vehicle and only reach out to people who are on that contract vehicle. Number three and number four are kind of related to each other, right? When I'm doing market research as a contracting officer, my end goal is I want to make sure I get a good proposal from a vendor that I may or may not award, right? But I want to know that I'm getting a response at least. And so number three is I'm going to look at this list of people who have responded to my other requirements. I'm going to look in there and say, well, company A, B, and C, they responded to similar type work before. Let me reach out to them and see if they're interested in participating in market research, right? Market research could be whatever level. There's so many variations of what people do. Some people do it in a sense where they just want 3 bids. Other people do it where they really want to get a lot of input from a lot of players in the industry. But if I look at people who have responded to RFPs, then I know they have responded in the past, and there's a good chance they will. Number 4, have they responded to my sources sought in RFIs in the past? That's a big one. They've engaged us and talked to us about their solutions to our needs, is what I'm thinking as a contracting officer. So think about this, right? I haven't even left my own office. I'm just looking at the incumbents, people who are on my favorite contract vehicles. Now I'm looking at people who have responded to RFPs or RFIs and sources sought. And then I'm going to number 5. I call it personal favorites, but favorites is too strong of a word. It really is. I've got this hard drive of people who have come in before that I've saved in there. And so I might look in there and see and just reach out to those people. It could be I keep a spreadsheet of people who have expressed interest in working with my agency, and I'm going to reach out to them. Hey, we've got this requirement. We're exploring, doing some initial market research. Number 6, I'll turn to the contract officer in the next desk, right? Or people around the room. Largest do this, by the way. They sit in a meeting with other business developers and they say, hey, anybody know smalls we can work with? Well, KOs might look across their contract shop and say, hey, anybody know a good cybersecurity firm, right? Something like that. But they trust their colleagues better than they trust the blind internet search. And so turning to them is a good one. Moving on to number 7, this is where you go into agency vendor lists or supplier portals. So HHS, NASA, Army, Contracting Command. These agencies have their own internal supplier portals where you should go register. Go to my newsletter. I've got step-by-step guidance on how to register in the intelligence community, in NASA, in NavAir, and many of these other ones. And so get in there and register. But if I'm in HHS, then I'm going to turn to the HHS supplier portal first. That's why we have it, right? So I'm going to look in there and see about who's there. Same thing on number 7, large prime contractors, by the way. Most of them have supplier portals that if you register in there, that may be one of the first places they look. Why look outside before I look inside, right? Number 8 is, and this is when it goes out to the, really the first public type searching. So DSBS is basically your small business profile based on SAM and DSBS. GSA has SAM, Small Business Administration has DSBS. Together, they make your small business profile. In there are the 360,000 small businesses that are currently selling to the federal government. That's where market research really happens. It's the only place labeled in the FAR, right? You should look out there, look out there. Oh yeah, don't forget to check DSBS, right? And it's a great tool for them to go look at you because you have keywords in there, capability narrative. And we'll talk about that in a second. The next one, number 9, is if they can't do market research through all the first 8 ways I talked about and build a list of 5 or 20 people, then so FPDS, yeah. I probably be curious about that one. So anyways, agency vendor list, if I'm not looking at these ones, then the agency posts a new RFI, a new source of SOC, right? This is when they get into that formal side of the market research where they're pushing it out there as a notice on SAM or whatever other tool, GSA, eBuy, et cetera. If they still don't get results, or if they want to broaden the market research, they might turn to an SBA district office who has the business opportunity specialist working with all the 8A firms and other firms. So they could turn and ask them, hey, do you know any small businesses that might fit this requirement in this district? And I have seen this happen, right? I've talked about this in the past training where I've had customers where this literally has happened. The SBA's reached out, put them in touch with the KO. And the last one is they may check with the PTAC and Apex Accelerator. I like using Oklahoma Apex Accelerator because they're very closely tied to Tinker Air Force Base that's out there. And they have a good working relationship. If you're in Oklahoma in particular, you should absolutely be talking to that PTAC. So this is where buyers look. When they're out there and they're trying to find you, this is where they look. So I wanted to kind of wrap up here with a slow walk through a checklist of a short list. How do you make a short list, a federal buyer short list? So remember, a short list is just being the 10 or 20 companies that federal buyer is going to reach out to talk about an opportunity. And a short list is a normal thing. Think about it. If you were going to get a job, or if you're a company that's trying to hire a bunch of people, you'll get 100 resumes on your table. And you literally will swipe it to the left, to the right, put it in the no pile or the yes pile. And resumes, we might do that with something as straightforward as a college degree, right? Does the person have a master's degree? No, yes, no, 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 yes, right? And so there's various reasons on why they'll put you on the short list. Here are my reasons. And really it's the top 3 reasons that I look at, right? It's the same thing I described with your capability statement. You're trying to get people to say yes or no as fast as they can. You don't want them to be confused. And so the first thing that they're going to use to determine whether you're on the short list is whether you're on the long list. And what I mean by that is, can they find you? We describe this as being findable. And so this idea of being present and findable means being present where they're looking. If they're looking in HHS's supplier portal, are you there? If they're looking in DSBS, are you there and are you findable? Meaning, do you have keywords in there like cybersecurity if you're a cybersecurity firm? 60% of small businesses are virtually invisible to federal buyers. This is why I tell you, go to GovCon in a Box and get your free visibility score. How visible are you to federal buyers? You should be at 100 points. So the first thing they do is they go, are you findable? Did you come up on my list? Congratulations. That in itself is the first short list. Think about this. There's 360,000 small businesses. I search for a cybersecurity firm and up pops 1,000 or 2,000. I just went from 360,000 to a short list of 1,000 or 2,000. Now I'm going to do the second step, which is matching the search intent. So what this means is your clear focused offer, what your company sells, does it align with what I just searched for? If I just search for elevator services, and when I look, it says you do demolition, it does road paving, it does this, it does that, including elevator servicing is just one keyword, then that's not really matching my search intent. But if I do a search on elevators and I come up and I see your capability narrative, go to the GovContent box, learn more about that, right? But if I see that and I see your narrative is describing projects you've worked on, we've dealt with elevator installation services and O&M. We specialize in Otis elevators and Hitachi or whatever, right? If I look at that, you're instantly matching my intent. I'm like, okay, there are many companies who say they do cybersecurity as a keyword, but when you look, they don't do anything with cyber. And that's the second time they're shortlisting back and forth. And then the third thing that they do is they look to see, do you have experience? Not that you couldn't get into a federal buyer with this process if you didn't have experience, but the chances of you getting in there with no experience is very small. If you haven't been paid for the work, then you shouldn't even be expecting the federal buyer to find you and invite you in. You should be working with small businesses to get that experience in government contracting, right? So you get it in the agency that you want to have additional work with, right? So they'll look to see, do you have experience? In DSBS, this is really easy. If they search for you and they find you through keywords, that's number one. Number two, they look at your narrative in DSBS and they like what they see. It matches what they were looking for. That's number two. Number three, they scroll to the bottom and in that past performance section, they see that you've been paid for the work. This is another reason to put you on the short list. It doesn't mean they're giving you a contract. It just means, hey, this looks like a company I can do some market research with. Some bonus ones that I put in here that you may have already seen is they might search on NAICS codes. So make sure, actually go check out a tool. We're releasing it soon. We just want it to be perfect. But this NAICS code tool that we have will go off and tell you what NAICS codes you're not using that they are using for your top keywords. And so it's a free tool to be able to make sure you have the right NAICS codes in SAM so that when they're searching and if they choose NAICS code, they find you. Maybe they're looking for a woman-owned small business. And so that's another way. It's not a lot you can do about that. You either have those tags or you don't. And same thing with contract vehicles, except with contract vehicles, you can look at the name and go, oh, they use NAVC. I should really be thinking about how can I get on that. Here's what I want you to remember from today's training, what I want you to do, right? This is an action item for today. Go to govcontentabox.com. You can see the URL pretty much everywhere on my page here, but get your federal visibility score. All you have to do is type your company name in or put your URL or UEI, and it'll come up with a profile and your score is in the top right-hand side. Click on the score and review what needs to be fixed. I give you guidance and a video for each step of the way on what you need to do to fix it. And then do that by raise your score to 100 by doing what I recommend. All of that is free. All of it is designed for us to just help you become more visible to federal buyers. Hopefully you'll get that done. Let me know when you get to the 100 Club. I'd love to add you on the list and celebrate it. Don't forget to watch all the training replays if you've missed anything, or if I talk about certain things like how do you get in the door, I have a training for it. If it's around sales and working with federal buyers, I've done multiple trainings on it, and you can find that in the replays. So if you appreciated what we've been doing this week, go ahead and throw a thanks in the chat because this is a team effort. I'm the face, but we've got a lot of people in the background helping. If you're doing over $2 million and you're interested in us helping you accelerate your business, we've got a BD Accelerator workshop. You can just put workshop in the chat and we'll follow up with you after the training. For all of us, just remember, government contracting, it is not a secret. It's just a process. I will see you in the next training.